You have factories and you have trading companies. Now, a factory is basically what you would expect. It's a factory. It's basically a lot of machines that produce a lot of items. And a trading company, though, is something more akin to what we think of in the West as a wholesaler or a distributor. They don't actually produce any products. What they do is they source a bunch of different products from different factories and then they sell them to international customers. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to both factories and trading companies. And one of the things I hate that I read online in different importing and sourcing blogs is that people say that trading companies are bad. No, trading companies are not bad, but they have certain qualities to them which may or may not be good for the type of business that you want to do. Okay, so factories, let's go over the advantages and disadvantages with a factory. So with a factory, you get lower prices. You're closer to the source. You're very direct with the factory, of course. So you're going to get lower prices than you would get with trading companies. Typically 5 to 10%, maybe 20% lower than a trading company. So the price difference aren't huge, but depending on the price sensitivity of your product, that 5 to 20% could be rather significant. The next thing is, and this is probably more important than price, is that you get more control in the manufacturing of your product. So if you're producing a widget, and especially if you want a lot of customization, you want to have direct control with the factory to kind of control what's being done. You want to talk with the factory, either the factory manager or the sales rep that has direct control at that factory, because it's going to create less problems than if you have a trading company in between you and the factory. It's like that game of telephone where if you pass a message through enough people, eventually the message totally gets distorted. So that's the big disadvantage if you're going with a trading company over a factory. Now, there are a few very important disadvantages with factories. The first is that you get less variety with a factory. A factory can really only manufacture one type of product. So they probably specialize in things like plastics or steels or electronics. They have a pretty limited product selection of products that they can create. So if you're trying to import a catalog of 50 different products, you're going to have to find quite a few different factories to work with. Trading company, you might be able to work with one trading company because they'll work with a bunch of factories in your favor. The other thing with factories is that they normally have higher MOQs. So normally the factory is creating the items just for you, and to turn their machines on, they need to institute a fairly high MOQ, minimum order quantity. Trading company, on the other hand, is probably sourcing the same product for a few different customers, so they can basically co-produce your order with another customer's order and get lower MOQs. I've worked with a lot of trading companies who basically have no MOQs because they keep all of the items in stock. The next thing is that with a trading or with a factory, the quality is a little bit less predictable. So with a trading company, they are doing their own quality control on top of the factory's own quality control. With a factory, they are the only ones doing quality control. And of course, hopefully you're doing quality control on top of the factory. But either way, with a trading company, they are going to do their own quality control. The factory is going to do their quality control, and hopefully you do your quality control. So you are going to have 3 layers of potential quality control to weed out any really bad quality products that might slip through. So factories don't necessarily have terrible quality. It's just, like I mentioned, you lose that other additional layer of quality control, which could or could not really impact the quality of your products. So talking about the factories, I pretty much gave you a rundown of the advantages and disadvantages of a trading company, but I'll just go into it again here really quickly. Trading company, you get more variety. You can import a lot of different products from a trading company because they're already working with a bunch of factories basically on your behalf. Like I also mentioned, you're going to get lower minimum order quantities with trading companies. Trading companies also tend to be more Western friendly. So a trading company specializes strictly, I shouldn't say strictly, but one of their main specializations is in customer service. So theoretically, they are going to be more Western friendly because that is kind of their raison d'etre, is to provide good customer service to international clients, where a factory's main competitive advantage is producing things. Like I mentioned, a trading company is also going to have higher prices, typically 5 to 10%, sometimes higher. The other thing I should mention, though, is that a trading company does not necessarily have higher prices, though, because they may have more buying leverage and they can pass those savings on to you. And the final disadvantage is that with a trading company, you have less control of your products and how they are manufactured. Again, there's one more layer of complexity and one more layer of communication in between you and the factory. So if you ask the trading company that, hey, I'm producing a garlic press and I want you to add a rubber handle onto it, well, potentially the trading company could get that message wrong, and your message would basically be distorted between you and the factory. Again, it's just like I mentioned, that game of telephone, things get distorted the more people you add along the line of communication. Okay, really quickly here, a few more notes about factories. So I've made this black and white distinction between factories and trading companies. But in China, there is no such thing really as a factory that produces every single component of a product. I am right now talking on this Blue Yeti microphone. Now, Blue Yeti may have a factory in China that they produce these microphones at. However, they do not produce every single component of this microphone. For example, they may produce the actual electronic component of the microphone, but they are not going to create the base, the buttons, and all the other little components that go into this microphone. They probably specialize in the main important parts of this microphone, but they cannot feasibly create every single component of this microphone. Same thing goes, for example, the Apple iPhone. The Apple iPhone is created by one of the biggest factories, quote unquote, factories in the world, Foxconn. Foxconn does not create every single component in that iPhone. They're sourcing a lot of those products from different factories. So when people say that, I'm working with a factory, well, what does that factory actually produce in the item that you're having made? It's an important question to actually ask your factory, especially on a complex product. Ask them, what part of this product are you actually making? It makes you sound more intelligent, and you may find out a lot of information about how that product is actually produced, which is going to help you in the long run create higher quality products and potentially negotiate pricing down the road. The other thing with factories is that factories have a wide variance in terms of sophistication and quality. Now, the popular way to group factories in China is between a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 factory, with a tier 1 factory being the best and a tier 3 factory being the worst. And actually, I've given a quality assignment to these factories, but I shouldn't say one is the best and one is the worst, because a tier 1 factory is a very sophisticated and robust factory. It's what you would expect to see in a Western country like the United States or Canada. They have a lot of systems and procedures. They're very clean and this and that. However, they are also very expensive, as you would imagine. And a tier 3 factory is basically a workshop in China. It's maybe simply a room somewhere in an office building. It could be an actual small warehouse, but it's basically a workshop of a few different people, a lot of times assembling a product, sewing a product, or doing some pretty basic manufacturing. Now, with the tier 3 factory, they do not have a lot of systems in place. They are a little by the seat of their pants when they're producing items, but they tend to be very cheap. And a tier 2 factory is somewhere in between, a little bit organized and a little bit dirty, but they have some systems and procedures. Now, why does this matter, you ask? Who cares if you're dealing with a tier 1 or a tier 3 or a tier 2 factory? Well, if you're dealing with a really refined and professional factory, you know that you're going to pay a higher price, and you probably don't need to pay as much attention to the quality of your products. They're probably have a pretty good procedure in place to make sure that no inferior quality products slip through the supply chain. In a tier 3 factory, a really elementary factory, quality is going to be a lot more of an issue. And if you are going to work with these types of factories, you're going to save on the cost, but you are going to have to make sure that you constantly have your finger on the quality control button. So at the very least, you need to make sure that you are using some type of quality inspection company, such as Asia Inspection. $300, you can have your items inspected. So at the very least, that's what you need to do. And you may even need to take your quality control to another level. So it's just important for you to understand the difference between various types of factories in China and their potential quality. Unfortunately, there's not a great way to identify one type of factory from the other. Over time, you'll develop intuition. I will include a few photographs here in this video to give you an idea of what one of the factories looks opposed to the other, just so you get an idea of kind of what to look for. So hopefully this video gives you a good idea of the differences between traded companies, factories, and then also a little bit about the different types of factories in China. Hopefully you guys found that useful, and if you did, feel free to comment on the video below or check out more videos and information on ecomcrew.com.